It is August 1942. You are 20 years old. You have never lost a war. This is not arrogance, or rather, it is arrogance. But it is the kind that has been so thoroughly confirmed by events that it no longer feels like arrogance. It feels like fact. You were 14 when the Führer came to power, 15 when the Rhineland was remilitarized, 17 when France fell in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, the French with their Maginot Line and their colonial empire and their certainty that they were the greatest military power in Europe. And somewhere in those years between 14 and 20, the belief settled into you not as ideology, but as atmosphere, the way weather settles, without a conscious decision. Germany wins. This is simply what Germany does now. You grew up in Duisburg in the Rhineland, a steel city, a city by the river, the kind of place where men measure their lives in shifts and smoke, and the particular pride of making things with their hands. Your father worked the furnaces until his lungs gave out when you were 11. And after that, it was your mother, Kata, holding the household together with the quiet, unbreakable competence of a woman who has never had the luxury of failing on her duties. Your brother Werner is 4 years younger, still at school. Too young for the Wehrmacht, which is a fact your mother does not discuss and does not need to discuss. You enlisted at 17, not because you were told to, but because you wanted to, because the youth had given you something the Steel City never quite managed, the feeling of belonging to something larger than a shift schedule and a ration card. The rallies, the marching, the absolute clarity of a world divided into the strong and the weak, the German and the other. It was intoxicating in the specific way that simple answers are intoxicating to young men who have grown up in complicated circumstances. You believed it completely. You still do. France confirmed everything. You were there, a private in the 6th Army, barely 18, watching the Wehrmacht move through the French countryside with a speed and precision that made the whole thing feel less like a war and more like a demonstration. The French ran. The British ran to their boats at Dunkirk. The great democracies, with their committees and their compromises and their fundamental inability to decide anything quickly, they crumbled in front of German will and German steel the way everything else had crumbled before them. 6 weeks. You came home on leave that autumn with the particular walk of a young man who has been proven right about everything he has ever believed. Your mother held you at the door for a long time, without a word to say. Werner looked at your uniform with eyes that were not envy exactly, but something adjacent to it. The look of a boy watching a story he is not yet part of, but is already looking forward to growing into. You told them, "It will be over soon. We are unstoppable." You meant it. Now it is August 1942, and the 6th Army is moving east, and the mood in the column is the same mood it has been since France, since Poland, since Yugoslavia, since the early months of Barbarossa when the Red Army collapsed in their hundreds of thousands, and the prisoners marched west in lines so long they disappeared over the horizon. The mood of men who have been told they are the master race and have watched the evidence accumulate in their favor for 3 years running. Your friend Kurt, 21 from Cologne, the kind of laugh that arrives before the joke, says, "Russia in summer, then home for Christmas. Same as last year, except we actually mean it this time." Your friend Heinrich, 19, quieter, a farmer's son from outside Aachen who joined because Kurt joined, says nothing, but he is smiling. You say, Stalingrad first, then home. No one considers the possibility that this is wrong. You reach the Volga in late August. From the high ground above the city you can see it spread out below. Stalingrad, running for 30 miles along the western bank of the river. A city of factories and apartment blocks and railways in the specific density of Soviet industrial construction. It looks from up here like every other Soviet city you have passed through, damaged already from the bombing. Smoke rising from a dozen places, the river behind it, flat, wide, and gray. You think, a week, perhaps 2. Around you, the men of the 6th Army make similar calculations. The arithmetic seems simple enough. Superior training, superior equipment, superior will. The Soviets have been fighting since June of last year, and they are still fighting, which is either admirable or inexplicable depending on how you look at it. But they have been losing consistently, and there is no reason to believe that Stalingrad will be different from everything else. There is every reason, as it turns out. You do not know this yet. The first day in the city teaches you something that no amount of open field warfare has prepared you for. The city fights differently. In France, in the open country, the Wehrmacht's advantages are total. Speed, coordination, air support, the ability to encircle and destroy before the enemy can respond. In Stalingrad, none of this applies. The streets are too narrow for tanks to maneuver effectively. The rubble, and there is rubble everywhere. The Luftwaffe has seen to that, which turns out to be a gift to the defenders rather than the attackers, creates a landscape of cover and ambush that reduces every engagement to its smallest possible unit, not army against army, not even company against company, room by room, floor by floor, and it is brutal in ways that no training has named and no order has prepared you for. The Soviet word is ad. It means hell. You learn this word from a prisoner, a young Soviet soldier barely older than you, thin and filthy and defiant in a way that surprises you, because the Soviet soldiers you have encountered before this have mostly been broken by the time they reach you. This one is not broken. He looks at you with something in his eyes that is not fear and is not hatred exactly, but the specific expression of someone who has decided that whatever happens next, he is not going to give you the satisfaction of seeing him afraid. You find this unsettling in a way you do not examine too closely. The fighting in the city is unlike anything you have imagined war to be. You have been in combat before. You are not a novice. You have been under fire. You have fired back. You have seen men die in the clean, terrible way that open warfare produces. But this is different. This is a building that was a factory yesterday and is a fortress today, where the floors above you may or may not contain Soviet soldiers, and the only way to find out is to go up the stairs. This is a stairwell that smells of smoke and blood, and the particular smell of a building that has been burning for 3 days and has not finished. This is a room cleared at terrible cost, that is lost again by morning, because the Soviets come back through a hole in the wall that wasn't there yesterday. The city is being destroyed around you, and the destruction itself becomes the terrain. Rubble as cover, collapsed buildings as fortifications, the shell of a grain elevator holding out for weeks against everything the 6th Army brings against it, defended by a handful of Red Army soldiers who should by any reasonable calculation have surrendered days ago, and simply have not. Kurt is still laughing, but differently now. The laugh has acquired an edge that wasn't there in France, a fraction of a second of something that isn't quite humor before the humor arrives. He jokes about the grain elevator, about the men inside it, about how many of them there can possibly be, about whether they know they are supposed to lose. The jokes are good. They are the kind of jokes that men make when the alternative to laughing is something they can't afford. Heinrich has stopped smiling. Heinrich, the farmer's son from outside Aachen who came because Kurt came, has acquired the particular stillness of someone who is paying very close attention to everything around him at all times, and has decided that stillness is the correct response to what he is paying attention to. He does his job. He does not talk about home. You write to your mother. You tell her the city is large, but the army is larger. You tell her Werner must study hard. You do not tell her about the stairwells or the smell or the expression on the face of the Soviet prisoner who was not afraid. September becomes October. The city has not fallen. The snipers are the thing that undoes the nerves in a way that artillery does not. Artillery is constant. You learn to live inside it, to read its rhythms, to find the half second between impact and the next round where breathing is possible. Snipers offer no rhythm. They arrive in the moments of stillness, in the pauses between engagements when the body dares to believe the worst is over. An Oberleutnant gone at breakfast, a man lighting a cigarette, the shot always coming from somewhere the eye cannot find, from a window or a rooftop or a hole in a wall that was not there yesterday. You learn to move differently, low, fast, never the same path twice, You learn that stillness in this city is not rest. It is a target. The mood in the Sixth Army is changing in ways that are difficult to name and therefore go unnamed. A slight flattening of the certainty that has carried you since France. A slight increase in the amount of effort required to maintain the belief that this is going to resolve itself the way everything else has resolved itself. Paulus, the general, precise and correct and utterly convinced that the city will fall if the army simply pushes hard enough. Keeps pushing. The city keeps not falling. It is November 19th, 1942. The artillery begins before dawn from the north. Not German artillery. The caliber is wrong. The rhythm is wrong. The direction is wrong in a way that takes a moment to process, because the direction artillery comes from has been consistent for 3 months, and the consistency of it has become a kind of geography, a fixed point by which you navigate the city. The fixed point has moved. The news comes through the chain of command in the way that bad news always comes. In pieces, each piece slightly worse than the one before, the full picture assembling itself slowly in a way that seems designed to prevent the mind from taking it in all at once. Soviet forces have broken through the Romanian armies to the north. Soviet forces have broken through to the south. The breakthroughs are not breakthroughs in the ordinary sense, isolated penetrations to be contained and reversed, but something larger, something moving faster than the situation reports can track. By November 23rd, the picture is complete. The Sixth Army, 300,000 men, the finest army Germany has put in the field, is surrounded. You stand in the ruins of what was once an apartment building, and you hold this information in your mind, and you try to make it mean what it means, and your mind refuses, because what it means is not compatible with everything you have understood about this war and this army and this century and your place in it. The master race does not get surrounded. The Wehrmacht does not get cut off. These things happen to other armies, Soviet armies, French armies, armies without the will and the training and the absolute certainty of their own superiority that has carried Germany from victory to victory since before you were old enough to enlist. And yet, the artillery is still coming from the north and the south. Hitler's orders arrive with the clarity of someone who has not grasped what has happened, or has grasped it and decided that grasping it is itself a form of weakness. Hold the city. The Luftwaffe will supply the pocket by air. A relief force is being assembled. The Sixth Army will stand fast. Paulus holds. The Luftwaffe cannot supply 300,000 men by air. This is a mathematical fact that the orders from Berlin do not acknowledge. The relief force, when it comes in December, gets within 48 kilometers of the pocket and is stopped. The gap between 48 kilometers and 0 kilometers is, in the winter of 1942 on the Eastern Front, an unbridgeable distance. The ring does not open. The cold arrives in December with the specific violence of a Russian winter that has no interest in the strategic situation of the Sixth Army. -20, -30. The kind of cold that kills exposed skin in minutes, that turns the rubble of Stalingrad into a landscape that is no longer merely destroyed, but hostile in a new and elemental way, as though the ground itself has joined the Soviets. The rations are cut. Then cut again. Then cut again. Kurt gets frostbite in his feet in December. Not badly at first. The toes white and numb. The kind of thing that can be managed with dry socks and warmth, of which there is increasingly neither. By January, the frostbite has become something else, something darker and worse. And the medical situation in the pocket is such that the something darker and worse cannot be properly addressed because there is no longer a proper anything in the pocket. No proper food, no proper shelter, no proper medicine. Kurt, who has been laughing since France, stops laughing in January. Not because something specific happens, because there is nothing left to laugh with. The energy required for humor has been redirected to the more fundamental task of continuing to exist, and even that task is becoming difficult. You sit with him in the ruins and you talk about Cologne, about the cathedral, about a girl he knew before the war, whose name he says 3 times as though repetition will make her more present. You talk about the Rhineland, about the river, about your mother's kitchen and the smell of it on winter mornings. You do not talk about the war. You do not talk about France, or about the Thousand Year Reich, or about the Führer whose photograph you have carried since you were 17, and whose voice on the radio, in the early years, made you feel that Germany was not just a country, but a destiny. You do not talk about any of that. Heinrich dies in January, not in combat, in the ruins of a cellar, of a wound that was survivable in September, and is not survivable now because the conditions in which wounds are treated in the pocket in January are not conditions in which wounds are treated at all. He dies quietly, which is the only mercy available. You are with him. You hold his hand because there is nothing else to hold and nothing else to do, and the farmer's son from outside Aachen deserves at least that. Afterward, you sit in the dark for a long time. You think about the Soviet prisoner with the unafraid eyes. You think about France, about the walk you had coming home on leave, about telling your mother it would be over soon, about Werner's face looking at your uniform. You think, I believed him. You think, I believed all of it. It is February 2nd, 1943. Field Marshal Paulus surrenders what remains of the 6th Army. What remains is approximately 91,000 men out of 300,000. The others are in the ground, in the ruins, in the river, in the places where the city swallowed them one room at a time over 5 months of fighting. 91,000 men, frostbitten, starving, sick, standing in the ruins of a city they were supposed to take in 2 weeks, surrendering to an army they were supposed to be superior to, in a winter that has demonstrated with absolute finality that the Russian steppe does not recognize the concept of the master race. You are among the 91,000. You are 20 years old. The walk begins, west to east, the wrong direction, deeper into the Soviet Union, away from the Rhineland and the river and your mother's kitchen and Werner at his books and everything that exists on the other side of this winter. The column moves slowly through the snow, which is the only speed available to men in this condition, and the Soviet guards move alongside it, and the steppe extends in every direction, without feature or mercy or end. Men fall, not dramatically, quietly, the way Heinrich died, the way everything in this pocket has happened, without the clean violence of combat, but with the slow, grinding attrition of a situation that has simply exceeded what human bodies can sustain. A man slows, a man stops. The column moves around him the way water moves around a stone, and he is left behind and the snow continues. You keep walking. You keep walking, because stopping is the one thing that is clearly and immediately fatal, and because your mother does not know yet what has happened here, and someone needs to tell her, and that someone is you. Behind you, somewhere in the column, a single shot. Then the snow continues. You keep walking. Kurt does not make the walk. You have known it since the first hours, in the way you know things you cannot confirm and do not want to. He was behind you when the column formed. He is not behind you now. The column is too large and too broken for the absence of one man to register, and so it goes unregistered, and you walk east and you do not look back. You do not think about the Führer. You do not think about the Thousand Year Reich. You are not angry. You are too tired to be angry. You are simply here, and the days pass, and you think about your mother. You were there. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted from August 1942 to February 1943. It is considered the largest and bloodiest battle in the history of warfare. Total casualties, Soviet and German combined, exceeded 2 million. The Soviet Union alone suffered over 1 million military casualties defending the city. Of the 300,000 German soldiers encircled in the Stalingrad pocket, Approximately 91,000 survived to surrender in February 1943. Of those 91,000, fewer than 6,000 ever returned to Germany. The rest died in Soviet captivity of cold, starvation, disease, and the accumulated weight of conditions that human bodies were not built to survive indefinitely. The last German prisoners of war were not released until 1955, 10 years after the end of the war. They came home to a Germany that had been divided, rebuilt, and transformed beyond recognition. The country that sent them east no longer existed. The ideology that put a rifle in their hands had been tried at Nuremberg and condemned by history. They came home different men. Some of them were 20 years old when they left. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, who surrendered the Sixth Army, spent the rest of the war in Soviet captivity. He became a vocal critic of the Nazi regime and testified at Nuremberg. He died in 1957. Adolf Hitler's response to the fall of Stalingrad was 3 days of national mourning. In his private communications, he described Paulus's surrender as a betrayal. He did not acknowledge that the encirclement was the direct result of his own orders to hold the city at any cost. The city of Stalingrad was renamed Volgograd in 1961. The battle fought there remains the turning point of the Second World War in Europe, the moment when the tide turned, when the Wehrmacht's aura of invincibility shattered, when the outcome of the war became, for the first time, something that could be clearly seen. It was seen most clearly by the men who were there, by the ones who came home, and by the far greater number who did not. History is full of moments like this. If this one moved you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. A thumbs up helps more than you might think. And leave a comment. Tell us which moment in history you'd like to step into next, or simply that you were here. Every voice matters. This is You Are There. We'll see you in history.